How's it going, everybody? This is Rob. We're here on China on the internet, and we have a very, very special time right here. We have a couple more guests. So in the past, we've had maybe one guest, but now we have three. So I want to make sure that I introduce everybody properly and correctly. So first and foremost, we have the one and only Jamel, aka MC Ting Bu Dong. So he's actually been on our show before, but for those who don't know, he is an NYC-based bilingual storyteller, multimedia artist, and a revolutionary. So he was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to study hip hop in China in 2008. So that's just crazy. That's right when the China Olympics happened. Oh my gosh. Anyways, returned back as a found sound China artist residence in 2018 and headlined his first mainland tour in 2019. So he's been featured, and he will rap in English and in Mandarin in politically charged verses using lo-fi hip-hop beats. He's combined technology, language, and music to create a very interactive sound. And currently right now, he's also been out in the protests as well. So he's been featured in a lot of different magazines from Variety, Vice, XXL, The Nation, and The Economist. So Jamel, thank you for coming. MC Ting Bu Dong. Then we also have Bohan Phoenix. So Bohan has also been on our show before. He's a Chinese-American rapper. He was born in China, then grew up in America. And he also is a bilingual rapper, and he's infused traditional sounds as well as with the modern hip-hop culture. And he's also toured around mainland China. He has his own record label, Love Love, and now he's back in America to do his thing. So Bohan, it's great to see you again. And then finally, last but not least, we have the one and only Uchechi, who is a podcaster, artist, and a teacher. And so she spent a lot of time in the Middle East in her early 20s. And then later on, she went to Beijing. And she has her own podcast called Buddy Pass Podcast, where it's her and two of her friends who've met in China. And they interview different people who are Black, who are thriving and living in other places around the world. And so when it comes to Black Lives Matter and anti-racist protesting, Uchechi's a storyteller, so she's been using her platform to discuss Black liberation movement in and outside of the U.S. So Uchechi, thank you for coming on to our podcast as well. So we got three amazing, phenomenal artists, storytellers, and voices. I want to get straight into some of these questions. So first and foremost, I guess for all three of you guys have been to the protest, right? So I want to first throw it off to MC Ting Bu Dong. How did you first get involved with the protest and with the movement, and how has that experience been for you? And after MC Ting Bu Dong talks, then we could have anybody else chime in too. At the end of the day, this is a discussion and a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, first off, shout outs to Rob, shout outs to the homie Bohan, shout outs to the new homie Uchechi. And Chinosity. I think this is a super important discussion at a time where people around the world right now are starting to lift their heads up and actually look and realize that white supremacy and racism is fundamental to the system of American capitalism, imperialism, that you can't actually separate the two. And when people saw that video of George Floyd having the life strangled out of him over 8 minutes and 46 seconds, they stepped out in the streets enraged, infuriated, but not just out of the death of one person, but for generations of oppression and the fact that these two things are linked. And so that's a lot of what you see out in the streets. That's a lot of, both the diversity of people who are out in the streets, as well as the diversity of issues that they actually bring forward around this concentration that Black Lives Matter, and what kind of a world do we need to create in order for that to be the case. I myself, as you mentioned, I'm a revolutionary down with the New York City Revolution Club and Refuse Fascism, which is an organization that's organizing to drive out the Trump-Pence regime at the soonest possible time through mass nonviolent protests. And so this has been something that's been core to my work, for years now. And in this particular environment, I think what really has drawn me into the fight and drawn me into the struggle around this has really been the question of what kind of future are we going to fight for, and where is this thing going to go at the end of the day, right? And so I'm there as part of, forces to actually organize to take this to where it needs to go. Like if this only results in getting a few more Black or brown faces of elected leadership while Black and brown bodies continue to pile up and get blown away by police, then we actually haven't solved the problem. right? We actually need to take this towards driving out the fascist white supremacists that's whipping all of this up and breaking through into a new society where Black lives can actually matter. But that's a little bit about what why I got involved with it from an organizing perspective.
Nice. And for you, Uchechi, I think it's very interesting because you were in China for some time now, and then you're back in America. And before we started recording our show, you mentioned that you're in South Carolina. How's the situation in like over there compared to where we are here in New York?
I wouldn't say the situation. Okay, there are going to be like obvious differences. Like New York City is a city with millions of people. South Carolina is a state with millions of people, right? But the city where I live is a few 100,000, if even that. So there's certainly been protests here, and I've been a part of them. But I think the kind of energy, the huge collective energy, you're probably going to most likely find that in denser populations than in a smaller town. So in that way, yes, it's different. But I think in the ways that it's just similar is that police brutality is everywhere. In the same ways that police like trapped protesters, pepper sprayed them, beat them in New York City, in Seattle, in Phoenix, in Atlanta, it's happening right here in Greenville, South Carolina. And to your point, MC Ting Bu Dong, I think one of the reasons why so many more people are choosing, because I think it is a choice to see what's always been happening right outside of your doorstep, why so many more people are choosing to acknowledge that these systematic systems of oppression are not working for anyone is because they finally saw that this police state will come for everybody. As long as you are fighting against white supremacy, which is the equivalent of the United States of America, it will come for you. Your grandfather will be talking to a police officer like we saw, and they will knock him down, he will bleed out the side of his head, and they'll keep on walking. Like, this state will come for you. I can't say when or how I got involved with like the protests or even wanting to like dismantle white supremacy, but I will say that from a very young age, I was very anti-war. And that's been a really big part of my life. Like having grown up in South Carolina when 9/11 happened, and the place where I grew up was very, very, very homogenous. It was actually like mainly Black, and had white people there, but it was mainly Black. So 9/11 happened, but I started to see all this Islamophobia. And that was the first time for me. I was like, this country ain't shit, because I know y'all don't know no Muslims. I know y'all have never gone to a mosque. I know y'all speak Arabic. I've never had any of these experiences. I know that y'all haven't had any of these experiences. And that really kind of opened my eyes, because being Nigerian American, I think my parents tried to make us believe that, okay, if you get a really good education and you do this, you do that, you will have a separate Black experience than that of African Americans. And so for my early life, I kind of thought that. I was like in the same public schools as everyone else, but I think I just saw that maybe my trajectory would be different. And when I just saw this sort of outpouring of Islamophobia first and foremost, that's when I knew that like something else was awry. And since then, I think over time, more and more and more and more and more of my eyes have been open. And particularly at this phase of my life, I think what pushes me so much, and in the work that we do with the Buddy Pass, is that I've been able to live in places where white supremacy is not the law of the land. And I've been able to live a life wherein my Blackness, me as a Black person being a like political being, is not the identity that's forced on me immediately. I'm not like overcoming my Blackness in every single moment. I've been able to live in places and live years of my life in that way, and it's been so liberating. And I want other Black people to know that this country is not the be all and end all. This country ain't even shit.
That's a great way to put it.
It's a young ass country. Young ass country still finding its way, like God, it's But yeah, I mean, like for me, I'll just hop in and similarly, I can't really pinpoint when I really started caring about. I wouldn't call myself a revolutionary or an activist at all. In fact, I'm doing a lot of educating for myself. Trying to understand more history, not just for other, not just other people's history, but also our own history as well, to better understand. But yeah, so I think, you know, when I first moved to America, you know, my stepfather, he's a Swedish American guy. He's one guy, you know, me and my mom were Chinese. You know, before, because I was rapping a lot, and before the white kids were really fucking with me, because obviously didn't look like them. It was in the gospel choir. It was with black kids. It was my gospel choir director, Sheldon Reed. You know, this giant 6'2" black man that came into my life and really gave me the confidence to be on the stages, to express myself, to pursue something that I really cared about. And you know, so what, by saying that, what I mean is, you know, all through my life, I've had experiences with different people that didn't look like me. So fundamentally, so politicals, all that stuff aside, I know what's happening. It's just fundamentally wrong on like a human basis. And that, and then in addition to that, you know, whether it be because of hip hop, whether because gospel choir, but yeah, over the years, I mean, I've had the same opportunity with white people as black people to develop a, you know, and I have a lot of great white friends, you know, but it wasn't, but I've only been able to build this bond with my black friends, with my minority friends, more so than my white friends. This closeness, you know, that's revolved around family unit, the values that we cherish growing up, you know, as minorities. And yeah, so it really, you know, I realized, yeah, even though my entire career I've been working with black artists, paying black artists, going on tour with black artists, and just trying to keep everything within the community as possible, I realized, man, it wasn't until maybe this year, maybe it wasn't until George Floyd happened for me to realize, oh, my understanding and my involvement in music is not enough. I need to be speaking up way more. I need to be out in the streets more. Like, I need to be talking to my peers more. And it's embarrassing for me to say, but it took a long time for me to realize that just me understanding that this is systematic racism, that this is beyond a mental switch you can turn on and off, before I even really, you know, can say I did anything that was substantial, you know. And yeah, so when, you know, when the protest started, first, of course, I had the worries for COVID, and then I just realized, fuck all that, like, you know, like, and yeah, and once I was out there with all the people, it just, it's hard to describe the feeling. I mean, like, I've performed in front of like 10,000 people, and it's not the same. It's like you're really one with all these people, and I know I'm rambling right now, but like it's just been a super powerful and humbling moment. There's so much to unpack even within the Asian community.
Definitely.
You know, and yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. That actually brings me up to my next question that I kind of want to ask, specifically for MC Ting Bu Dong as well as for Bohan, for both of you guys. Like, do you feel that other, say, because you both are in the hip hop industry, do you feel like other Asian hip hop artists are doing their part to speak out on Black Lives Matter? Because we have seen time and time again where Asian rappers, for example, have taken Black culture and have exploited it for their own benefits, but then may not have actually like paid their homage and respect to where it came from. So, and especially during a time like now, do you feel like, well, number one, we're doing enough, and if not, like, what more can rappers do, like, within their own community, as well as like other Asian, say, influencers or just people in general? Like, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in and throw some comments, and I know Bohan has a lot to say on this subject. I mean, I definitely want to, you know, shout out Bohan for both for what he just laid out, and I really hope people were listening and really getting into what he just laid out about both the opportunity and the challenge that this time actually presents, and then the necessity of people to actually step up. Like artists all together need to step up and step out, and this needs to be a massive society-wide debate of where we need to go. And that actually takes all of us to actually make that decision and step out into the streets. And definitely just really want to acknowledge, like, it is a real difference if you're out there, you know, deepening these protests, supporting these protests, stepping out into the streets, helping them to spread. You know, that's actually a real material way to support this. And yeah, I mean, I think within the Chinese hip hop community, I mean, again, we should just, this isn't a monolithic term, for right? That would just be like saying within the Black community, we know that there are all different, you know, ways of thinking and trends within it. Right. You know, there are homies in China who you know, in 2008 who came up with and kind of that golden age of China, who, like, when stuff is breaking out, they're shooting me text messages like, yo, Black Lives Matter, bro, or checking in, hey, need some young, yo, do hao ma, you know, it's like they're checking in with you to just make sure everything is cool, or, you know, or they're showing you, like, you know, like I remember even this last time in 2019, a lot of friends, especially my homie Jawe from Purple Soul, like having very deep and debated, like, political discussions around where things should go. And so there is a whole section of people who, a whole section of artists, you know, Chinese artists who, because of their affinity to hip hop and actually how long they've been in it and how deep they've studied it, that they've actually gained, like, a political awareness of the issues that are concerning not just Black people, but people all over the world, right? And they actually see themselves as, like, actually speaking for the oppressed in the world, right? There are lots of artists who are like that. I think the issue comes with, you know, the kind of larger artists, right? These, you know, more pop style artists, and, you know, with the influence of rap of China, which frankly has popularized the culture, but sanitized the politics and the radicalness out of it. And so you have just a vastly uninformed audience that a lot of these, you know, much larger acts, right? You know, your much larger pop acts, you know, are not actually, there's no audience to actually hold them accountable. Whereas here in the United States, if you aren't actually speaking up around this issue right now, you kind of get your feet pulled to the fire in a way that's not happening in China right now, where the main concern, you know, I was just chatting with Jawe the other day, is like the virus, is Corona right now. And so that's a bit to explain some of the dynamic, but in terms of what people can do more, I think, you know, this is really an important time to acknowledge, like, a really shared history of experience and of both art, culture, and radical political movements that actually fought against oppression between Black and Asian communities and America, and Black and Chinese people internationally. You know, you had, you know, Mao having a correspondence with the Panthers and civil rights leaders. You know, you had Paul Robeson singing Chi Lai, you know, in introducing that to people in Harlem and actually raising money for the Chinese Revolution, you know, and revolutions around the world. Like, there's actually a shared history of this, and this actually presents an opportunity to actually bring, you think about people around the world, Korea, Japan, you know, there ain't no Black people like that in Korea. Like, I mean, there are a couple, right? But it's like, we can count them all. And it's, you know, you have whole places where there aren't whole sections of Black people there that are throwing into this fight. This is actually an opportunity for China and for, you know, to have a global community around this. But that's what I'll say on this for now.
Can I add something to that? Like, just a number of things you point out that I think are really, really important. And I'm like, I really hope that listeners tuned into this, that we already have shared histories of like communal fights for liberation. And I think I'm a high school teacher as well. I teach the humanities, which is really a cross section of everything, right? Art, history, politics, all this. And I think that there's so many egregious things about the American public school system, as I work in one. But I think one of the most egregious things when it comes to talking about civil rights is that our civil rights movements have always been global liberatory movements. Like, we have not been talking into a vacuum. We have not just been talking to white people. We have so much history of Black people and Asian Americans, and then also, as you mentioned, MC Ting Bu Dong, of Black people, and then people who were in Asia, people who were in, at that time, Soviet Union, people who were in Latin America, having a conversation about how do we dismantle this thing called white supremacy? How do we dismantle this thing called capitalism? And I think now since the 1960s, and that sort of re-envisioning of the American relationship with Asia and with Asian Americans, and now putting all Asian people into this model minority status, which I understand why folks clung to it, considering how poorly they had been treated and mistreated and essentially enslaved to also build the American economy through the 19th century. It makes sense. But I think that a lot of Asian Americans are essentially living under a lie and living under a guise that they can assimilate into whiteness, and that they have assimilated into whiteness when really they have been used as tools of white supremacy. And like that, honestly, that makes me so sad, considering the history that we have. And on our, and then also to kind of key into what artists can do. So we had a podcast episode that released just this week of a Black woman called Renee, who is she's a full-time model in South Korea, and she's worked with some of the greats, and she's been on stage with like BTS. And so we were having this conversation about BTS, because if you close your eyes, listen to BTS, like I keep on thinking that I know what the fuck they're saying, because they sound so Black, right?
Come on.
Yo,
like, I just sat with friends being like, yo, what the fuck, bro? Like, I mean, the appropriation is like times 1,000, and it's really amazing music. And so BTS came out, and they donated $1 million, and then, like the BTS army donated $1 million or whatever. But we were having this conversation about like, what does, on the international stage, because our music, our culture is such a currency, what does reparations look like from the perspective of those people who are appropriating our culture? And I don't think that it's giving $1 million to the NAACP legal fund, because first of all, you don't even know what that is. Second of all, that's not even really where the money needs to go. First of all, actually, that's number one. And then something that Renee was talking about is like, but still, I'm out here and I'm killing the game, but y'all still relegate me to these roles of like best friend number 3.
Yeah.
So I think, in having a conversation about what can artists do, also we need to think about how does white supremacy live in the systems that of the art creation that we're doing as well.
That was great. I mean, both you and Jamel just touched on so many things that I just been thinking about and talking about the last couple of weeks. I think I'll just talk about the whole Asian rappers thing first, what Rob had asked about. So beyond, just me contacting all the Asian rappers that I know in China and trying to get them to, because we as rappers, we're like the most vocal people in our community. And, we are everywhere. We're trying to, so for me personally, growing up, I mean, I got my confidence, I got my swag, I got my knowledge, I got everything from hip hop music. Hip hop taught me to be the man I am today, and then beyond that, the friends that I made, the places I've got to travel to. So it's, so for me, I know personally how much I gained from hip hop culture, right? So while my friends in China and Asia are making 6 figures, up to millions of dollars, cashing in on this, and while Black Lives Matter is happening, they are quiet because they're afraid of their fans rebuking them for not speaking up for Hong Kong. It's the same democracy. It's a democracy issue, but they're like, so that I made that my crusade a couple weeks ago online, like calling these people out, and then I realized what Uchechi was saying. These guys are giving money in a sense to be like, we did our regular programming. Am I frozen or am I good?
You're frozen for a little bit.
Good. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. So like for me, like in a way, I realized, okay, yeah, if more than money would help. Not gonna lie. Just the money coming out of the pocket, coming over here, it's that's better than nothing, right? But I realized, and what I was urging ADA Rising, who I helped back in the so it's I think the fans needs to be educated, and rappers and companies like ADA Rising that have such a following, they have the responsibilities to do these educations. you know, it's crazy because, you know, when I'm out in the protest, I see like older Black folks. You know, we don't have this in our DNA whatsoever, and we don't. Our parents never shared the stories of the people in the past who are Asian Americans. We were never taught to be proud. It's like what Uchechi was saying. Like we were taught, yo, we got a great opportunity to come to America. We got a great opportunity to assimilate. If you just be a model minority, you can't have blah 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 blah. You know, so we've never been taught to be proud as our own people. So we can't. So a lot of our people can't relate to Black people out there in the streets being like Black Lives Matters. They're like, well, yeah, our lives all matter. You know, they can't understand the mentality because let's like Uchechi said, they feel like this whole time they've only been a recipient of benefits, from white America. They don't realize, you know, that white supremacy doesn't just stop with Black people, and that they could oppress Chinese people the same way, that they would love to do it the same way, you know. And so a lot of the activism wasn't passed down from our parents. So we as Asian Americans, this is actually our generation. This is the first generation where we are coming up with the terms, where we're coming up with the concepts to educate each other Asian Americans in what's happening, you know. And I think it's a crucial time for the Asian rappers to speak up, because Asian American rappers speak up, and people like 80 Rising, because I mean they represent the Asian community whether we like it or not, and their ignorance, it's the blanket over all of us. That's why, you know, shout out to Rob, shout out to Chinosity, and any other Asian homie that's out here, because we're doing the extra work, you know, and we should be doing extra work, you know, because we've too long profited off of the efforts of the Black community and the Black culture, you know. So yeah, it's frustrating. I've been so mad in the last couple of weeks, but I realize, you know, I think there's more practical ways to go about, you know, this.
Definitely. No, like all three of you guys made like amazing points in terms of learning the history, in terms of the context, in terms of artists who have spoken out about this, artists who haven't, the difference between someone who's like an idol versus someone who's like more local and who's down with it. Like, I think those dynamics are very important.
It just fucking pisses me off, because like when I'm in China and I'm at these guys' shows, they're like, yo, keep it real. I'm keeping it real. They got the dreads. They got the education on YouTube to do their hair, to do their songs, do the masters. They can educate themselves on all these things, right? But then when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I'm talking to Masway, and they're like, oh, we didn't know where to donate. Oh, we don't. And you're like, really? You know what I mean? It's like, and I get it. They live in a world where they don't need Black people's approval to make money. They could never come to America. They don't ever need to leave China. They never need a Black person to be like, yo, y'all real. They don't need that. So there's no urgency whatsoever. You know what I'm saying? So it's, and like a lot of people thought I was petty calling them out on social media. I was like, yo, I try to talk to them in person. Clearly that don't work. And if you know what I'm saying, if the fans embarrassing them works, you know, and can get some money out of their pockets and maybe get them to, you know, like share some resources on Instagram, you know, whatever. Like I'll antagonize myself. Who cares? Like,
I mean, I think so the thing about that is I don't think that's a bad move either, because honestly, something like that works. You know, like it's important to. That's why we're seeing, like, you know, even outside of Asian like companies, right? You see a lot of American companies who it kind of forces them to take a stance on Black Lives Matter.
It's fucking sad that people needs to be forced to take a stand like this. A lot of, you know, the last point on the whole China and what's happening in China, a lot of artists are hitting me back saying, yo, this is too political. I'm like, it's not a political issue. People dying is not a political issue. You know, it's like, if you're getting like random kills, not a political issue. And on top of that, it's purely on some government shit, but China loves this opportunity to shit on American government right now. On social media in China, there's all the titles about condemning America and supporting Black Lives Matter. So it's not even a sensitive thing to be posting about Weibo. You know, like if you're posting about Hong Kong, you might get your shit. But if you're talking about supporting Black Lives Matter on Weibo, nobody's censoring you. You know, so it's just
Interesting.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So question about that. So they're like places like in China, they're willing to censor something like the Hong Kong protests, but not something like Black Lives Matter. I'm not as versed in like what's happening in China and how they perceive like Black Lives Matter, but what from your guys' experiences, like being in China and working in China and currently what's happening right now, are people receptive to Black Lives Matter in China? Like, or do they have an idea of like, I mean, you talked about it's not as urgent, right?
Well,
but
yeah.
It's like, no.
Well, it's like Jamal said, right? Like there's a generation of, you know, hip hop artists that were so affected by the real spirit of hip hop, which is born out of this rebellious, born out of this, you know, anti-oppression state, that a lot of these rappers were talking about that they shouldn't be talking about, and they got censored. They lost all the opportunities to perform. They, you know what I mean? Like, so these people, these guys really get it, you know. But as Jamel said, as time kept progressing, as it became a reality show with over 2 billion viewers, they had to take out the context. They took out the history. You know what I'm saying? Like Chinese kids are seeing dreads on Chinese kids for the first time. It's just a crazy thing because it's like the reception is only those people that already know it. It's not, you know, there's no new kids that's like, I'm gonna wake up today and learn about the plight of Black people in America and care about it, you know, like, and that's why, like, I'm like talking to like ADA big rappers. I'm like, yo, y'all can at least educate the fans, the same fans that love hip hop, fans commenting like Black people are dirty. I don't want to get next to Black, you know, it's just it's really.
I think something that you said, which I think is really, so if we even back up and think about the Chinese response, like the party's response to it right now, I hope someone has written a thesis about this. I would love to read it. I think this is just like a playbook that we can look to from like the 50s and 60s, like at the same time that there's like the rise of Chairman Mao, and the Soviet Union did the same thing, that they were trying to create a wedge between Black people and America. We're using this like, okay, look at how bad America is. We're so much better. Look at what they do to Black people. We don't do that. So, and there have been some like, in terms of the party, there have been some like sort of genuine cooperation, but then there's also been a lot of propaganda. And I wonder if the party's response right now is that playbook. So that's one part of it. But I think additionally, what I think is really, really, really important with regards to thinking about our joint liberation is to also consider the ways that you have been oppressed. Mm-hmm. And that was a point that you were making, Bohan, is like, okay, that first generation of rappers in China really knew their shit because they were feeling, right? They were feeling the boot underneath their neck, right? And when Black Lives Matter, you know, we had vigils and we would talk about it with friends and we would talk about it in our communities, but I think a lot of people, they just kind of felt like, oh, that's a really bad thing that's happening. We're sad that that's happening, but also like Black people are this and Black people are that. So
yeah,
I guess the last thing that I will say is that the narrative that white supremacy pushes around the world is very, very strong about Black people. It's very, very, very strong.
Right.
And I've just seen it emerge in the strangest places. And so I think that in the same way that white people have absorbed certain narratives about Black people, other people around the world have learned that from the United States.
Yeah.
And if they would engage with their own history, like if China would engage with its own, even I think just focus on Japan or something, like you would remember that only 50 years ago, like they were colonizing your whole country.
Right.
Right. And for so long, like find the part of your history that shows you what it means to be under the boot of someone else, and you will then be able to empathize with what we've been doing. But I think in my experience, a lot of my friends in China weren't doing that particular work.
Right. And to kind of like just say, I just want to say, last thing about the reason I brought up that government thing wasn't to say that the Chinese government actually, you know, cares about the plight of the Black Lives Matter movement. I was just using that as an example to say that these rappers are able to, you know, post about these things without being silenced. But yeah, and you know, I think what you said about China learning the narrative from the West, I just want to give like a story about something that I've been sharing about my aunt in Chengdu, who after, you know, I told her I was living in Brooklyn, she's learned that Brooklyn through the internet, through TV, as a Heian-chu, you know, as the Black people area, right? So she'll ask me, am I safe? She'll ask me, am I do I ever get bullied or treated unfairly making Black people music? And she was just always worried. And you know, she's like, to her, Black people was bad. To her, Black people was probably criminals and people that and were uneducated. And the reason for this was because they were Black, and that was it. And that there was no contact. She has never met a Black person. She doesn't know nothing about Black people. And then when we were on tour in 2016, two of my roommates, who one is Haitian, one is half Black, half Jewish, and they came with me on tour, and we all stayed with my aunt in Chengdu. And a week later, my aunt is in love with these guys. Like my aunt can't, like, she's 62 in Chinese, and she's learning their English names. She calls Ralph Raph because she can't say Ralph. Yeah. She calls Zach. And it's just like, and like to this day, she'll ask me about them. Say, hey, when are you coming back with Ralph? Are you coming back with Zach when I go back to Chengdu? And you know, she tells me like, wow, like Black people are like some of the nicest people. And I had to tell her, I was like, yeah, like, you know, all the stuff you were saying before. She goes, yeah, I know, like it's really embarrassing. And you know, and she's just a clear example of just Western narratives dripping over into Chinese society, and there's no other narratives to go against it whatsoever. So if my aunt now, like when, like, you know, like is you've been to China, you see it's everywhere Shaoqu, and you know, my aunt and me and my friends were walking in and out of the Shaoqu, you know, and they're seeing her with these Black people, and they're going up to her, asking her, it's like, yo, what are Black people like? You know, are they scary? Like, are they? You know what I mean? And she goes, no, like they're fucking awesome. And she's showing them photos, like she has a photo about, you know, she's showing a photo, like, yeah, like they're awesome. You know, so and I'm saying that's and even though that's a very basic level of understanding that, yo, different people are just like me. But it was a powerful moment. It was a powerful thing to see her, you know, having this like Black is bad to like, you know, and I think if she can be a voice of reason, then again, these rappers, you know, so